in this video, I'm going to introduce cellular respiration and cover through glycolysis, and I'll make a separate video for the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain, and a final video for anaerobic respiration. So to start us off, what is cellular respiration? This is the process by which mitochondria break down food molecules to produce energy in the form of ATP. The important organelle for this process is the mitochondria. So the mitochondria is shown here. It is a rod-shaped organelle with a highly folded inner membrane. So it has two membranes, the outer membrane and then the inner membrane that is extremely folded up. And those folds are called cristae. And then inside the inner membrane, we have what's called the matrix. That is the blue-looking stuff because it is a fluid where various enzymes and intermediates can dissolve for some of these reactions. So note that the reason the inner membrane is so highly folded is because it increases the surface area for some of these reactions to take place. So in other words, if you have greater surface area of the inner membrane, then you can produce more energy because there's a greater area to carry out those reactions that produce the energy in the form of ATP. So this is a little bit of review from cell chemistry, but different forms of food will produce different amounts of ATP, but they're also different, what am I trying to say? There's different ones that are preferred to make ATP. So carbohydrates, as we learned in our cell chemistry unit, are the ones that are most commonly broken down to make ATP. And the most important carbohydrate for this is glucose. Fats can be used to make ATP, and they actually store the most energy out of all of these, but carbohydrates are the easiest ones to get the energy out of, so that is the most commonly used. Now, proteins can be used to make ATP. If you look at this chart below, it does make about the same amount as carbohydrates, but they are least likely to be used to make ATP. And the reason why is because they have so many other important functions, particularly like structural functions and enzymes and things like that. So the body's not going to break down proteins unless it is completely starving and it is out of carbohydrates and lipids. I think there's a common misconception that proteins are used to make ATP because you think, oh, I need lots of protein if I'm going to be nice and strong, but you really just need that protein in order to build up the actual muscle fibers that are in your muscles. You would also need just as much carbohydrate to support those muscle fibers and allow them to contract using the ATP that they need for that process. Here is the equation for cellular respiration. You should note that this is the same as photosynthesis, only in reverse. So in this case, you need glucose, C6H12O6, plus oxygen, 6O2. And you'll end up producing CO2, H2O, and energy. And in this case, obviously you're not producing light energy, you're not glowing, but you are producing energy in the form of ATP. Okay. I'll also note this picture down below has left something off. Can you pick up what's left off as far as the outputs of cellular respiration? It was trying to show it in word form, but it left something off. So see if you can figure out what that one is. So as I said before, the cellular respiration is just the mirror of photosynthesis. So whereas photosynthesis requires energy, CO2, and water, and produces sugars and O2, cellular respiration requires, sorry, I went to the wrong side here, requires sugars and O2 and ends up producing CO2, H2O, and most importantly, the ATP, along with some heat energy as well. So, they are just opposites of one another. Okay. This diagram shows the same thing as far as the equations and the fact that the equations are just the reverse of each other. I'll let this play for a second. So the reactant, this is using reactants and products, so inputs and outputs are usually better terms because they're really summaries of multiple, many different reactions. Let that go one more time. Okay. We'll skip over this for now. So there are two types of cellular respiration. There is aerobic respiration and there is anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is with oxygen, so that's the one that we just saw the equation for. And anaerobic respiration is without oxygen. So AN in front of a word means not. So in this case, not aerobic, does not require oxygen. You'll notice that number 1, I listed glycolysis. This is the process I'm going to talk about in just a moment. Both aerobic and anaerobic respiration start with glycolysis. So this is the first initial breaking of the glucose. This process itself does not need any oxygen, which is why it is the first step of both aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So we're going to focus on aerobic respiration in these first 2 videos, and then I'll do a separate video for anaerobic respiration. So the stages of aerobic respiration are, as we just said, glycolysis, followed by the Krebs cycle, and then the electron transport chain. So glycolysis, you can see in the first picture, we'll get into a summary of it in a minute, but it is breaking the glucose into these 2 3-carbon molecules, releases a little bit of energy, and this occurs in the cytoplasm. So you'll notice it is not inside of the mitochondria. Those 3-carbon molecules will enter the Krebs cycle. They'll be broken down even more, releasing CO2 and energy. And then finally, some of the energy molecules, the electron carriers that are produced in the Krebs cycle, will enter the electron transport chain and produce most of the energy of this whole process. Okay? And that requires the oxygen and produces the H2O. So we're going to cover glycolysis first, and then we'll make a separate video for Krebs and electron transport chain, linked out for a second. So, as I said before, glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. So this does not require mitochondria. Any cells can carry out this process, even those without mitochondria, like prokaryotes / bacteria. The basic description is the overall goal of this is to break the sugar. So if you look at the word glyco, stands for sugar, lysis stands for breaking. So you are breaking the sugar in this first process. So you're going to break it in half, split the glucose, the 6-carbon glucose, into 2 3-carbon molecules. Notice that does require a little bit of ATP to get that started and make that initial breakage. And then you're going to take these 3-carbon intermediates and change them around, rearrange them, change some bonds around so that you get some more energy out of them, leaving you with what's called pyruvic acid or pyruvates. And these are the 3-carbon molecules that exit the glycolysis. From this, you get some NADH and 4 ATP. So overall, you are producing 2 ATP because 2 are used, 4 are produced. That equals a net gain of 2. You produce 2 NADH, and you produce the pyruvates / pyruvic acid, that 3-carbon molecule. Let me see what the next slide. So you can watch this wrap on your own. It's posted in Teams. But just to kind of summarize, again, you got that first step of investing some energy and cleavage, which in this case just means to split, does not mean what else you might be thinking. And then the final phase is to get the energy out. So when you watch that video, see if you can point out those different stages. You don't need to know all the names of the intermediates at this point. You really just need to know pyruvate comes out and then the various, follow the energy through the rest of it. Okay, so that is the end of glycolysis. I'm going to stop this video here so it doesn't get too long, and I'll make a separate one for Krebs and the electron.